Did Jesus have brothers and sisters? Did he have siblings? We're going to take a look at this. First of all, Matthew 13:55. This says, "Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? Are not his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas?" That's from the Gospel of Matthew, and this is the crowds that his hometown in Nazareth saying that they're questioning Jesus because they've grown up with him their whole life, and they're questioning him being the Messiah, the Christ, and all this, and they throw that in there, whether they point as just a common fact that are not his brothers among us, are not his sisters among us. So I wanted to take a look at this because Jack Pacibiak, let me switch over here. He comes from it from the Catholic perspective, and I don't know whether if this could be true or it could not be true. I don't know 100%. I don't think anybody does, and Jack doesn't as well, whether Jesus had brothers or not. I think from the plain reading of the text, it seems like Jesus had brothers and sisters. It seems like he had brothers and sisters, but it comes from the Catholic teaching and doctrine of the church that Jesus' mother, Mary, she stayed a virgin her whole life, the perpetual virginity of Mary. And that might be true and all, I don't know. But from the plain reading of the text, it does not seem like, it seems like he had brothers and sisters. And I'm just going to read a couple of the things that Jack's put on X yesterday. He went off on it. He tweets a lot, so it's hard to find everything he does, even when you go to his page. I had it a second ago. So he says, if Joseph, and I think that when he's saying this, he says, if Joseph had older sons, why didn't they come to Bethlehem for the census with their father? And I think he's kind of reacting to people that are holding to almost the Catholic position to say that yes, Jesus had brothers and sisters, but they came from Joseph coming into the marriage, and he brought them into the marriage. And that's why they're there. That's why they're there. And then he goes into if Joseph brought sons and daughters into the marriage with Mary, and that could explain those texts that we just read in Matthew. But then he brings up, then why weren't they searching for Jesus at the temple when he was young and all that? Let's kind of skip forward a couple things he said. He says, another tweet yesterday, if Mary and Joseph had other kids, why didn't they go to Jerusalem with their parents for the Passover festival? And then it says, it's not just a common sense reading of the gospel that Jesus was an only child, no brothers at Bethlehem, no brothers at the temple, at the wedding, at the cross. The mentions of brothers meant close relations in the context of the time. There really isn't anything else to it. It doesn't seem like that. From the straight literal reading of the text, it doesn't really make much sense. So the town in Nazareth was just, they throw this in there that aren't his brothers and sisters among us, aren't his relatives among us, aren't his cousins among us. That doesn't really make sense. It doesn't flow, and it's not the actual wording. And I know there's flexibility with the wording, with brothers, in the Old Testament, Abraham calls Lot his brother when it's not his brother. But we use it so like loosely. You could say, you're my brother, to all my brothers out there. It's just a familiarity. But it doesn't make sense in the context of what he's saying. Aren't his brothers and sisters among us? And to even say the sisters part of it, why would, just to say your female cousins and your male cousins? And then also he goes into, why didn't Mary and Joseph ask their other children to help look for Jesus when he went missing at the temple? It doesn't say they didn't. And I wouldn't be coming at from the Catholic perspective that Jesus had no other brothers or sisters. I would say that the brothers and sisters were after Jesus was born. They were younger brothers and sisters. And I think this is where it gets to the heart of the issue, because in the Catholic Church, they put Mary so high. They put Mary so high and say that it would almost desecrate her that if she had children after Jesus was born. And I know there's a lot of arguments from both sides, but I don't think it necessarily would, because I've heard arguments for the Ark of the Covenant, because it was a holy place. Jesus was holy. He was inside the womb of Mary, and to just make it just an unholy thing by him having, or her having other children, it would do that. And I don't think it would at all. I don't think you necessarily, this isn't something where I could say the Catholics might have this right. The Catholics might have this right, but I don't think they do on this one. I think it becomes where it's all about your posture, I would say. Do you feel like doubt in your heart that you have to just make other people believe this to almost secure your own faith? Because I think that is the perspective of when we talk about these things. Like at the heart of Christianity and at the heart of every Christian, it's like we want truth. What is truth? And wherever that leads, I'm good with it. And I think it becomes tough when you become like just completely tied to a organization, a particular church, that now if one of their doctrines is not exactly correct, then my faith falls apart. My faith falls apart because I'm completely diehard bought in for this particular viewpoint. And I think that is the misconception of a lot of Christians. They think whatever church they're going to, whatever church they have chosen, that has to be the correct church. Everything about them, they are the inspired word of God. Whatever they say goes. And most churches out there don't necessarily do that. But like with the Catholic Church, that is a claim of theirs. That is a strong claim of theirs. And I'm not saying that they got everything wrong or got everything right. I think they got a lot of things right. But this one, it doesn't particularly make sense it just comes from the point of view of the Catholic Church believes that Mary was a virgin her whole life. So we are going to kind of maneuver the text. We are going to reform it to make sense with our already conceived doctrine. That's where it goes. Feels for me, because that doesn't fit. And like when you have to kind of push so hard that Jesus, he was the only son of Mary. I think that's where you go. That's where you end up at, because the text itself doesn't seem like it says that. I want to continue because he said a bunch of stuff. Jack, I love he does this. He's always tweeting Christ is King. He's probably being a little bit controversial about that. If you know the underlying things with all that, he says, "I love Jesus." He says nothing to debate. Adelphos doesn't mean biological brother, and it certainly didn't in the first century Israel. They all when Paul writes a letter, he always writes to all my brethren, my brothers that are out there. So there is flexibility with the word itself, I get that. But in the context of what happens in the Gospels and just the plain reading of the text, I'm of the opinion right now, it does not seem like Jesus was the only son. I believe he was the firstborn of Mary, and then some way along the way, the other brothers came, James, Judas, Simon, or the list that they have on there. And we know that there's that emphasis in the Bible that after Jesus' resurrection, he appears to the apostles, to Peter, and then to James, the skeptic. This is his hometown, back in my hometown, still messing around. I think about Jesus, his hometown. They saw him grow up their whole life, and it was tough for them to see somebody they saw him going to prom. They saw him going to his bar mitzvah. They saw him going, doing everything right alongside them their whole life, and they were completely skeptical of him. And it says Jesus was just amazed at their unbelief, and how much harder it would have been for his own brothers. And that's why it says his brothers, they dissed on Jesus. They made a mockery of him. They said, "Oh, go to Jerusalem, your time." They were just poking him and just making fun of him constantly, berating him. And that is why James probably had he had a literal come to Jesus moment when Jesus appeared to him after the resurrection. And it says that's why it specifically points that out. It says, "And the brother of James," that he appeared to him, because one who was an unbeliever, he disbelieved in his own brother. And when you really think about it, it would be hard to believe, because he saw Jesus was probably just goody two shoes, the perfect child. Mom and dad love him more than me. It would have been tough to just believe that he's the actual Son of God, no matter how much people tell you about it. And that's why I'm always I firmly believe that I can talk about this all day and along. Anybody can hear this stuff, and nobody can. It is impossible to believe in Jesus unless God turns on the lights. And that's why I can look back before I became a Christian. Somebody could be telling me directly to my face, and they were talking to a wall. And that's why if you're talking to anyone that doesn't believe in Jesus yet, it's not for their lack of maybe trying, or it's that they don't have the hardware inside of them yet, or the software upload, whatever it is. And I think James, he had to have that software upload, and then the hardware came alongside when Jesus literally appeared to him. But the plain reading the text, it seems like that Jesus had brothers and sisters to me. I'm not saying that it's like a done deal. We'll find out when we get to heaven. When Jesus comes back, he can tell us. But at this point, it seems from the plain reading the text, if you don't come to it with any just preconceived notions, that's where it seems like we land. All right. So I know you've loved this video. Follow me on X and Instagram at @BrandonFogel, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.